So I was going back and rewatching season 1 of Loki. And one of the things that stood out to me is when he gets to sit down with the various variants in the void at the end of time, Classic Loki, or old Loki, is given an opportunity to share his story. Obviously, our Loki Prime, or I guess Loki, what do we call it? It gets a little confusing, doesn't it? Our main character, Loki, is very interested as to why an older version of him would even exist. He knows that he's supposed to die. It was discussed with Mobius. He saw the film. And looking around, all of these other Lokis are about his age or younger. So the notion of an older version of him that actually has experience and perhaps wisdom to lend to the group is of extreme interest. And if you go back and rewatch that scene, what he says is actually very telling. It's kind of foreshadowing to some extent what our Loki will be.
Tell them your story, Loki.
Me? Nobody wants to hear about that.
I would, actually.
I cast a projection of myself, so real, even the mad Titan believed it. Then hid as inanimate debris. I simply drifted in space. Away from Thor, away from everything. Thought about the universe and my place in it. And it occurred to me that everywhere I went, only pain followed. So I removed myself from the equation. Landed on a remote planet and stayed there in isolation. In solitude, for a long, long time.
How did the TVA find you?
I got lonely. To tell you the truth, I missed my brother. And I wondered if he missed me, if anybody else did. But as soon as I took my first steps to getting off the planet, the TVA arrived. Because we, my friends, have but one part to play. The God of Outcasts. Nothing more. The God of Outcasts.
Our Loki, too, ends up, for all intents and purposes, in space, completely alone. For all the comparisons to the Loki, the god of stories that we have from the graphic novels, in reality, Classic Loki is telling us who Loki will ultimately become and kind of evolve into over time and tapping into the depths of his sorcery. The God of Outcasts. And what do we see in Classic Loki? He's able to survive because he's accepted this role of existing to eternally lose by removing yourself from the equation. But ultimately, he ends back up on the TVA's monitors because he can't live like that. Ultimately, he has to get involved. And in this case, in a much more, older, sadder, but wiser Loki, he's doing so not to conquer. He's doing so out of loneliness. He misses his brother and he wants to connect with him. He wants to know if Thor misses him too. I wonder if in some way this is foreshadowing what will become of our Loki. Maybe this is a warning to who Loki will ultimately be. Our Loki now sits on the throne, right? He is the literal god tier version of Loki. He is the god of Outcasts. He's the god of the multiverse. He's got the whole multiverse in his hands, if you will. And he's playing this active role, but behind the scenes, with no glory, right? The glorious purpose is more burden for him. But to do so, he has to exist in this state of disconnect. Like literally he's holding it all together, and yet he is completely removed and disconnected from it. The multiverse is safe because he resides in the seat of power. But if, like Classic Loki, he decides to break free of this, to step out of this outcast space that he's found himself in, probably out of love for his brother and a desire to reconnect there, that throne suddenly becomes vacant. And a power vacuum, the likes of which we really have not seen, could potentially exist in the multiverse. And somewhat ironically, the thought of Loki not being on the throne could lead to doom for all of us.